Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Um, I am Marty Cook, and I'm the host for today's Pennsylvania Wine Society virtual wine tasting. And we have a pretty special show for you today. My co host today is Kevin Ostrowski, and he will be telling us all about sparkling wines from the world over. So before I begin, I just have a couple of housekeeping things. Please keep your microphones muted throughout the entire show. However, at the end, we are going to have an open mic segment where you can ask Kevin all the questions you want, but it'll just turn into a free-for-all if we don't keep our microphones muted during the presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you. And again, this is the Pennsylvania Wine Society. We'll have more on us at the very, very end before the open mic segment. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to, oh, and one other thing, please use the chat facility. I think some of you have already found it. Open up the chat window and ask questions. And throughout today's presentation, we will answer your questions. And with no further ado, then, Kevin, I invite you to take it away.
Very good. Thank you very much, Marty. Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year, first of all. Very, very, very happy to be presenting this presentation to you this afternoon on sparkling wines. And if I may open by just proposing a toast to all of us for enduring a rather challenging year last year. I guess in some regards, it's still challenging, but nonetheless, it's one of those periods where either you deserve some sparkling wine or you need it. And we'll talk about that in a little while, but a toast to everyone for a happy and a healthy and safe 2021. Cheers, everyone. With that, we are talking about the world of sparkling wine. I myself am sipping on a champagne, a Veuve Clicquot non-vintage champagne. And I have here with me, I'm just having some crackers. It's as the presenter, I didn't want to put too much on my plate. So I'm just having a little party here, enjoying a sunny afternoon here in Western Pennsylvania. But the world of sparkling wines is fascinating and interesting, and hopefully I hope to expose you to a lot more in the way of possibilities in the way of sparkling wines. A little bit about myself. I'm not going to go through this in detail. I retired from my professional career in 2014. I consulted for a couple of years, but since then I've been keeping busy, let's just put it that way, with wine-related kinds of activities. There's the laundry list. Again, I'm not going to dwell on that too much. Sparkling wine actually is first documented back in the first half of the 16th century. The first documented wine would be Blanquette de Limoux, which would have been made by the Benedictine monks. Blanquette, literally translated, means white. The white wine of Limoux would be how that would be said. And most likely it is, although the origins are not specifically known, it is believed that at harvest time, when the grapes would have been crushed and the wine made and bottled, they would have been put in the cool cellars for the winter. Come springtime, with some of the yeast and some of the sugar not totally fermented, the re-fermentation would start happening again when the weather would warm up again in the spring, and the corks would start popping off. The bottles would explode. This was because, again, as we know today, carbon dioxide buildup inside the bottle was causing this increased pressure in the bottle, and they couldn't quite figure out why that was occurring. Again, in 1531, we don't know about yeast. We don't know about secondary fermentation. The wine was referred to as the devil's wine, primarily because of the popping corks and the exploding bottles. You can imagine that they would have suspected there was more to the story, although they weren't quite sure when. The Limoux region is located in the Languedoc, and there in southern France, as the map would seem to indicate. The method that they were using, and I guess by our modern terms today, That method of making wine, where the wine actually re-ferments itself in the bottle, is called the ancestral method or ancestral method. Today, we also call it PETNAT or pétillant naturel. In this particular case, in modern times, we actually try to duplicate that same process with these PETNAT wines. And in so doing, these wines are typically made in a tank, although they could be made in a bottle. When the alcohol level gets to be about 5 to 6%, again, that's up to the winemaker, they rapidly chill the wine so as to let the yeast go dormant. The wine is then bottled, and they put a crown cap on the bottle, creating the carbonation inside the bottle of wine. Again, those are the PETNAT wines. They are made they're very, very popular right now, and they seem to be more frequently found in the markets. I put one up here that's available in the Pennsylvania control system. I found it online. There's the code, there's the price. This particular wine is a Blanquette de Lemieux. It's made in the ancestral method. The grapes are typical of that particular region, which is a Mauzac grape. If you've not heard of that before, that's a Vitis vinifera grape. It is, I guess, a lot of the tasting profile says that it's reminiscent of apples primarily. But in that particular region of the world, Lemieux, seems like Chardonnay and Chenin Blanc are starting to take over. So Mauzac grapes are not all that frequently found as much. But anyway, the process is interesting. They try to duplicate what the ancestral method would be by allowing the wine to ferment itself in the bottle. Here in Pennsylvania, if you're familiar with this particular winery out of Kennett Square, this happens to be one of my favorite wineries. Winemaker Virginia Mitchell, a Penn State grad, with Brad and Lily Gaylor, the owners, have been making wine now for a few years. They began making a PETNAT wine made out of Chardonnay, actually. I have not had the opportunity to taste it, but knowing Virginia, her wines are always, always very, very good. So if you get a chance to get to Kennett Square, their whole portfolio of wines are delicious, but you may want to try their PETNAT, which is a Gaylor Estate sparkling Chardonnay. I'm going to kind of go through this quickly. Nonetheless, these are some key milestones in the production of sparkling wine. Up in the upper left-hand corner, King James I, the King of England at the time, would have been in the mid-1600s, was actually running into a lot of challenges with urbanization, a lot of rapid population increase. Also, he got involved with a few foreign wars. As a result, he actually passed an edict in 1615 that said any wood that is going to be cut down from timbers was not allowed to be used for the production of glass. English glassmakers had to go back to using coal for glass making, and they found out actually that the coal made a much better glass, which allowed us to make much better bottles and much stronger bottles, which were able to withstand the pressures of the sparkling wines. In 1662, an English scientist by the name of Christopher Merritt identified this whole concept of secondary fermentation. Again, he did not understand yeast. He did not understand what exactly was happening. All he knew was that there was a second fermentation that was taking place in the bottle, and that's what he documented. Most of us are familiar with Mr. Dom Perignon, a Benedictine monk. As you know, the monks and the church controlled much of the land and much in the vineyard at that time, mostly because noblemen were trying to grease the skids in terms of getting themselves into heaven. So they ended up donating a lot of land to the church. Dom Perignon was sent to the Abbey Saint-Pierre d'Auvilliers, and at the Abbey, Dom was made basically the vineyard master and cellar master. Although he didn't exactly invent champagne, he certainly has been given credit for it over the years. Dom was very well known for his making very fine wines. In fact, his attempts and all the things he did was basically trying to prevent the secondary fermentation from taking place. He was very good and blended the grapes from the field in order to achieve balanced wines. He also was very key to identifying pruning methods, which would increase the yields. He also was the one to use red grapes for the first time in the generation of white sparkling wines. So Dom was responsible for a lot of innovations in the sparkling wine world. Unfortunately, he was probably not the inventor of champagne, although he's credited with it. The title slide that we have here, Tasting the Stars, again, comes from a supposed quote from Dom Perignon, where he says, brothers, come here, I am tasting the stars. That actually was not even documented for the first time until the late 1800s as part of a marketing campaign. And that's where it was believed to have actually been generated. But why spoil the legend? Let's give Dom the credit. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to be tasting stars. 1810, Veuve Clicquot and her cellar master have a lot of things to do to improve the sparkling wine production. Of course, Veuve, the widow Clicquot, inherited the winery from her husband at the age of 27. With his untimely death, she became the widow Clicquot. In French, Veuve would be the word for widow. So the widow Clicquot and her cellar master, Antoine Muller, saw that it was rather wasteful to transfer wine from bottle to bottle to try to eliminate the sediment or the yeast or the lees from the bottom of the bottle. The cellar master and Veuve Clicquot took the kitchen table, drilled some holes in it, and created what we now know as, in French, it's called the pupite. In modern times, it's the riddling rack, where we allow the sediment to inch its way down to the neck of the bottle where it can be easily removed. So Veuve Clicquot and her cellar master were the inventors of the riddling rack. In 1844, we developed the cork and muselet, the wire cage, that helps keep the pressure in the bottle. And it's not until 1857 that Louis Pasteur actually identifies yeast as the organism, and that was in turn responsible for secondary fermentation. So again, we start out with the production of sparkling wine in the 1530s. We don't fully develop it until the 1800s. So it's a period of over 300 years that sparkling wine production actually is refined. The methods that Veuve Clicquot would have used and the French to this day use and much of the world uses is the traditional method. In the Champagne region, this is referred to as the méthode champenoise. Throughout the rest of France, using this method, the wine would be called Cremant. And again, it would be Cremant de whatever the region is. So Cremant de Bordeaux, Cremant de Bourgogne, Cremant de Loire, or Cremant d'Alsace would have been wine, sparkling wine made in the traditional method, and most likely using indigenous grapes of that particular area. For example, in the Loire Valley, Chenin Blanc is quite often used. In the Alsace, it would be the noble grapes of Alsace, the Pinot Gris or the Pinot Blanc. Another term that you might find on your bottle might say méthode traditionnelle, depending on where the sparkling wine was made. In Spain and in Portugal, the traditional method, and probably on the bottle, it says método tradicional. Cava is primarily the product, the sparkling wine that's made in Spain that is made in the traditional method. In Italy, metodo classico or metodo tradizionale. And in this case, Franciacorta is the most notable place in northern Italy, in Emilia-Romagna, that's making sparkling wine in the traditional method. Germany, Klassische Flaschengärung would be the method. The wine itself called Sekt. South Africa, Méthode Cap Classique. And in the United States, we simply use the traditional method. So depending on what the winemakers say on the bottle or in their literature, you might find any one of those products from those particular countries. The bottom line, they're all using the traditional method. Now, the photograph there, or the illustration, we'll talk about in more detail, but I just wanted to put the language out there that you're going to see on all the different bottles. Of course, starting out with the king of all sparkling wine, Champagne, coming from the Champagne region in France, cool continental climate, chalky soils. They primarily use 3 different grapes to make champagne. Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier. Chardonnay is always bringing a citrus note and acidity to the blends. Pinot Noir, a little bit more body and a little bit more robustness in addition to some of the berry flavors. And Meunier, although I think you probably would have seen Pinot Meunier is a more common term to use. Today, the French have dropped the word Pinot and simply use the word Meunier. Meunier, by the way, literally translated means miller. And this refers to the fact that on the grapevine, the leaves have a dusty appearance as if they were dusted in flour. So that's how kind of the grape got its name, from the dusty appearance of the leaves. Thus, Meunier is the name of the grape. Also interesting to note, 2 out of those 3 grapes are red grapes. And as you may well know, with the exception of some grapes in the world, they are referred to as Teinturier. Most grapes have a white pulp and a white juice. Some exceptions I'll note in a minute, but the Pinot Noir and Meunier grapes and Chardonnay, of course, are all used in the production of white wines. In the Champagne region, they are also allowed to use Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, Petit Meslier, and the Arbein grape. Down in the lower right-hand corner there, I wanted to let you know that Drapier does use the Arbein and the Petit Meslier grape to make another style of champagne. I don't know if the label's real clear, but it's I think it's pronounced Quattaro is the name of the champagne out of the Drapier house. But they use some of those unusual grapes that we don't see all that often. The other 2 photographs are just an illustration of the soils in Champagne. But those are the 3 primary grapes, and not only are they used in the Champagne region, they're used around the world to make most of the sparkling wines that we're familiar with. Also, on your bottles of champagne, you somewhere on that bottle, you'll most likely find one of these 2 codes, or 2-letter codes. And the 2-letter code tells you where the grapes have come from and who made the champagne. I'm not going to read through all of them. I'll give you a couple of examples. The most notable at the very top of the list, Récoltant Manipulant, is grower champagne. This is a champagne house who grows their own grapes and then produces their own wine in their own house. Somewhere on the bottle, you'll find that code RM, Récoltant Manipulant. The next most popular is Négociant Manipulant, NM, which is a champagne house that purchases most of its grapes from someplace else. So for example, the Veuve Clicquot that I'm drinking right now, it has NM on the bottle, which simply means that the grapes have been purchased from many other places, but the house of Veuve Clicquot has produced a champagne. MA, Marquet d'Acheteur, buyer's mark is the translation. This is your Kirkland brand, the Costco house brand of champagne. This is a case where Costco has contracted with, in this case, Manuel Janison, to produce champagne strictly for Costco's purposes. So on the bottle, you'll find MA listed, simply telling us that that's a Costco brand made specifically for Costco by Manuel in this case. I guess that's really all I wanted to mention here. Again, I have an illustration on the next page. This is a bottle of Rosé Drapier. And if you go to the back label at the very bottom where they actually list where the champagne house is located, there's the NM code, in this case, Négociant Manipulant, which means that Drapier had purchased grapes from several other sources, but they made the champagne in-house. I just thought that's pretty interesting that, again, you have all these different codes on the champagne bottle telling you where the grapes were grown, or at least where the grapes came from that made the champagne. The grapes are then picked at night. They're picked by hand in the vineyards, and they make a base wine called a vin clair, literally translated clear wine. If all white grapes are used, and as you know from the previous slide, that's if all Chardonnay is used, The champagne produced would be called a Blanc de Blanc, or a white from white. And if it's used Pinot Noir or Meunier grapes, the champagne may be called a Blanc de Noir, white wine from black or red grapes. The Vin Clair becomes the base wine for the sparkling wine. The Vin Clairs are tasted, sampled, all the tasting notes are kept, and then we form a blend. We blend the Vin Clairs together. This is the process called assemblage. And during assemblage, what we're doing is trying to achieve our house style, or perhaps improve the acidity or the body, whatever it may be. This is where we assemble the blend for the final product. Once we're satisfied with the blend, we then add the liqueur de tirage. This is the product that's going to create the secondary fermentation. Liqueur de tirage contains sugar and liquid yeast cultures. This is what's going to cause the secondary fermentation to occur in the bottle. In addition to the liqueur de tirage, which would go in first, we're going to place a small plastic capsule called a bidule inside the bottle. Later on, this is going to be used to collect the lees, the sediment, in preparation for removing the sediment. And then we cap it with a crown cap or a beer cap, whatever word you want to use. But the liqueur de tirage is what's going to cause the carbonation and the secondary fermentation to take place. The bottles are then stored. They're laid down and stored where the yeast does its work. There's actually two things happening, actually. The crown cap does allow a small amount of oxygen into the bottle, a small amount of oxidation in the wine, which should give the wine maybe a little bit more character. And again, that kind of is dependent upon the winemakers. The lees, the yeast, the dead yeast sediment, is collecting at the bottom of the bottle. And over the course of time, that dead yeast goes through a process of breaking itself down, the process called autolysis, where that adds some of the flavors to the wine that we're familiar with in Champagne, especially those biscuity, bready, bread-flavored, toasty flavors inside the wine coming from autolysis and the dead yeast. In order to be called Champagne, once you add the liqueur de tirage, that secondary fermentation, that wine has to age for at least 12 months on its lees as a minimum in order to be called Champagne. If you want to label your champagne as non-vintage, it would have to rest in the bottle and age for 15 months prior to release. And in a vintage champagne, which all the grapes are from the same year, and on your bottle, if it's a vintage champagne, it may contain the word millésime, which simply translates to a vintage champagne. That champagne has rested inside the bottle for 36 months prior to release. In this picture, you're looking at a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon from 2010. And also you're looking at several champagne house workers that are working to formulate the blend from the Vin Clairs. Here's some illustrations. The upper left is simply a stack of bottles resting in the caves. The upper right-hand corner is the collected lees at the bottom of the bottle. The lower photographs I thought were interesting. The one on the lower left is from, what my guess is from the 19th century. You remember we called this the devil's wine, and you can see that in terms of protection, this champagne house worker protecting their faces from potentially exploding bottles. In the lower right-hand corner, I took that photograph at the Schramsberg Estates out in California. And you can see the reason I like the photograph is it shows you how the bottles are stacked to the ceiling inside the caves, but also how the workers, in this case, they're loading the bottles into the gyro pallet containers. They themselves, each one of them is wearing a face mask to preclude any bottles that are randomly going to explode. You can imagine out of thousands of bottles, even if one bottle is damaged, if one bottle breaks, the shards and that explosion is going to impact several bottles around it. It could get to be pretty disastrous. So with that, the cellar workers all are going to take full protection of face masks. And again, that has been going on since the 1500s, recognizing the danger of the bottle pressure. Here's just some illustration of the next step. What we're going to do now is try to work those lees down to the neck of the bottle. I already mentioned Veuve Clicquot in the riddling rack, or the pupite. Her and her cellar master worked on that, cutting holes in the kitchen table in order to get that sediment down to the bottom of the bottle. And on the right-hand side is an illustration of a gyro pallet, a machine that is now used today to do the same thing. A lot less work, a lot less effort. The gyro pallet automatically rotates the bottles in order to get the sediment down to the base or to the neck of the bottle. From what I've heard, on a good day, a person working a riddling rack can handle about 60,000 bottles a day. They do that by turning the bottle a quarter turn and a slight tilt upward until the bottles and the sediment is all at the base of the bottle. Of course, the gyro pallet is all mechanized. It does it all itself. I thought you would enjoy the story. The photograph there in the lower right is Willie Frank out of the Dr. Frank's winery in the Finger Lakes, Keuka Lake, Hammondsport. Willie Frank was the son of Dr. Constantine Frank, and Willie was the one who began the sparkling line of wines at the Dr. Frank winery. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Willie Frank, when he was making the sparkling wine at first, of course, was using the riddling rack. And you can see Willie standing there next to the riddling rack, for his portrait photograph. This story came from Megan Frank. This would be Willie's granddaughter, who is now the general manager up at Dr. Frank's winery. When the winery bought the gyro pallet, Willie was not happy. He did not like the idea of a machine to replace a human being in handling each individual bottle with all the care that it deserves. Well, they convinced him that it was not only cheaper and faster and easier. In order to get Willie to come on board with the use of the gyro pallet, what they did was they allowed Willie to go down to the cellars every morning, and Willie got to press the button to rotate the machine. So even though it wasn't an individual hand touch of each bottle, he still had to be the man to press the button to hand riddle the bottles. And Willie was okay with that. So I thought that was just a great story. It's a good photograph of Willie Frank. Some additional pictures. There's the pupite, the riddling rack, also some lees at the bottom of the bottle. And then there's an actual photograph of a gyro pallet. You can see the controls there off to the left-hand side of the photo, where you push the button and the whole rack rotates enough to get the lees and works the lees down to the bottom of the bottle. Just out of curiosity, if you're thinking about it, riddling, I think takes, by my memory, it takes several weeks to get the riddling rack and the lees in the bottom of the bottle, where with a gyro pallet, it only takes a week to 10 days. So the gyro pallet clearly is better for overall large scale production. The next steps in getting our wine made is to disgorge, get that sediment out of the bottle, remove the crown cap, let the lees fall out of the bottle, and then we add the liqueur d'expedition, or the dosage. After the dosage is added, the cork and the muselet are added. In addition to the cork and muselet, they're also going to put a plaque at the top of the bottle. The plaque is that little metal cap that kind of evenly distributes the pressure on the cork from the muselet. But we'll talk a little bit more about the process. But when this is all done, the pressure inside that bottle of sparkling wine is about 5 to 6 atmospheres, or 70 to 80 pounds per square inch. Depending on your vehicle, that's about 2 to 3 times the pressure inside your automobile tire. So you can see that's pretty substantial in terms of overall pressure. Again, the cork and muselet is typically used in today's modern wines, with some of the pet nats using a crown cap. An interesting story, if you happen to collect those little metal caps at the top of the bottle, again, you would be called a placomusophile. There's an actual group and organization that I guess trades these like baseball cards. I'm not sure, but they're fun to collect. You can see the one there from Moet. I just removed the one I have here from my bottle of Veuve Clicquot, and you can see it has the Veuve's photograph or the image at the top of the plaque. So they're fun to collect. Every house, of course, would have its own. Anyway, the upside down bottle, you can see the lees are collected in the bottom of the bottle with the crown cap. This is all mechanized in today's world. The neck of the bottle is dunked in a solution of very cold glycol, sub-freezing, where an ice plug forms made up of frozen yeast and frozen yeast cells. The crown cap is removed, the plug is ejected, and then immediately the cork, the plaque, and the muselet are installed. Again, it all happens in a matter of seconds. The lower left-hand corner is the old method of doing it by hand. Of course, today it's all mechanized. In the modern methods, they can process about 1,000 bottles or more on a daily basis, and they only lose about 1 liter of wine in the process. You would think that after they pull that crown cap and they eject that little plug, that they would lose a lot more than that, but they only lose about 1 liter throughout the course of the day. The liqueur d'expédition, or the dosage, in turn generates what we know of as the sweetness levels of the wine. These are all the different terms that are used, and depending on what you're drinking, you can see the sugar levels that are in your particular wine. Brut nature would simply mean that they did not add any additional sugar into the final blend. Brut nature would be a bone dry sparkling wine. From there, we go to extra brut and brut, which would be extra dry and dry. Then we go extra dry and sec, and then finally demi-sec and sweet. So depending on that dosage or that final addition of wine, your sweetness levels are adjusted at this stage of the production. And I would say that most of the wines that we enjoy today are probably labeled as brut, which still contain a rather large amount of sugar if you look at it. But again, this scale was all built on a relative scale. And again, depending on what you're drinking, it's probably going to be labeled similarly. Getting into some of the champagne houses, of course, Moet being one of the more popular and well-known. The house was established in 1743. Their primary top-of-the-line champagne is the Dom Perignon label. This is called the Tête de Cuvée, which is basically the head blend or the head mixture. The Tête de Cuvée is their top of the line. Again, you can see the pricing based on current PLCB prices. You can still buy vintage Dom at the PLCB, in addition to some of their non-vintage products, the Moets. It was a favorite of Louis XV of France. This particular one is dry, but it contains all the various key grapes, Pinot Noir, Meunier, and Chardonnay. Incidentally, some of the other Tête de Cuvées from some of the other champagne house, Roeder, I'll talk about Roeder here in a minute. Let's see, Perrier, the Perrier label, their Tête de Cuvée is called Josephine. Bollinger, which was a popular wine with James Bond, their Tête de Cuvée is called the Grand Agnier. And Veuve Clicquot, which I'm drinking the non-vintage Veuve, but the Tête de Cuvée Grand is Grand Dame out of the house of Veuve Clicquot. Napoleon Bonaparte was known to be a fan of champagne. It was Napoleon who supposedly uttered the words, "In victory, one deserves it. In defeat, one needs it." Thus, my toast at the beginning of the session. After the year we've had, depending on our situation, we either deserve it or need it or both. But Moet and Dom Perignon would have been a favorite of Napoleon. I thought it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about how to get it out of the bottle. In order to open a bottle of champagne, it's always advisable to remove the cage, the muselet, and then be sure to put a towel or at least your thumb over the top of the cork. Again, 5 to 6 atmospheres of pressure, that cork can cause some significant damage. Once the towel is covering the cork and the muselet, you actually turn the base of the bottle. You turn the bottle, not the cork. And then slowly the cork will begin to extract itself out of the bottle because of the pressure. I have been told, and I don't know who made the quote, but they said the sound of the champagne cork coming out of the bottle should kind of sound like a nun passing gas in church. So it should not be the loud pop sound that we kind of like to see and hear, but a lot of work went into putting those bubbles in that bottle. We're trying to preserve them best we can. So carefully turn the bottle and let the cork wiggle itself out. Now, a more dramatic method, which most of you probably have seen or familiar with, is called sabrage. This dates back to Napoleon's cavalry, the hussars, post-French Revolutionary time. Popular legend said that they were in such a hurry that was the quickest way they could get their bottle of champagne opened while on horseback. Another legend has it, and I think this one's a little bit more believable. They usually picked up their champagne at the house of Veuve Clicquot, and many of the soldiers, trying to impress the widow, remember she was only 27 when she inherited the house, but they simply used this method trying to impress upon the available widow their skills at opening up a bottle of champagne. So I've never tried this before. I would like to one day, but as you can imagine, it is a rather dicey operation to whack off the top of a champagne bottle. And if you go to YouTube, you can find a lot of failed attempts that have pretty disastrous results. In terms of the glassware to be used, probably the most popular, and I'll guess many of you today are using the champagne flutes. Technically, the theory is that it shows the bubbles rather well. You can see the bubbles quite well as they dance their way up to the top of the flute. They also tend to concentrate the aromas at the opening of the glass, which is also good. Not too long ago, and you still may see some champagne towers at weddings and other ceremonies made out of the champagne coupes, the large open-ended glasses. The most popular glasses today used in the Champagne region, and that's the one I kind of have here today. I can't see it real well, but there it is a tall tulip-shaped glass, kind of has the benefits of both a larger opening as well as a little bit taller to allow us to see the bubbles and appreciate the aromas. You could argue one technical aspect or another, but the bottom line is they all hold sparkling wine and champagne just fine. Enjoy it. Don't worry too much about your glassware. It's a party. Enjoy the glassware. Now, I did want to share with you an interesting story about the champagne coupe. In the upper left-hand corner, of course, Marie Antoinette was certainly a fan of champagne, and legend has it that the champagne coupe was modeled after one of her left body parts. Her left breast was supposedly used in order to produce what we now know of as a champagne coupe. I also wanted to tell you an interesting story about Tsar Alexander II. the Tsar of Russia. He happened to be a very big fan of the Louis Roederer's Cristal champagne. That was his favorite champagne. This is a champagne that was also very popular in the 90s with a lot of rappers and hip hop stars. I understand that it's now fallen out of favor. Nonetheless, the reason why it's notable is because the Tsar of Russia, Alexander, was very, very much worried about terroristic activity and the possibility of assassination. So he did not want to find a bomb in the bottle of champagne. So he demanded that the Louis Roederer house make the bottle out of clear glass so you could see inside the bottle. And also, as you're familiar with the bottom of the bottle having that indent or punt at the bottom of the bottle, the Tsar demanded that that punt be removed because we did not want anyone to hide any explosives in the bottom of the champagne bottle. So to this day, the Roederer Cristal is made out of clear glass and has no punt at the bottom of the bottle. And if you're so inclined, a bottle of Cristal will set you back about $300 at your local state store, but you can certainly toast the Tsar once you open up the Chrissy. Winston Churchill was a big fan of champagne. It is legend that he drank 2 bottles a day, and over his lifetime, about 12,000 bottles of champagne in his lifetime, which is a pretty substantial challenge. As the story goes, it was in 1944, Winston Churchill attended the reopening of the British Embassy in Paris. And with the party and the dinner, everyone knew that Sir Winston loved the ladies, so they were sure to seat him next to Odette Paul Roget, the wife of the owner of his favorite champagne. Well, Winston and Odette hit it off. They became the best friends. After that party in Paris at the British Embassy, Winston went back and he in turn named one of his racehorses Paul Roget. I did not know this, but apparently Winston was a big fan of racehorses and owned several, but he was also well enamored with Odette, and he named one of his racehorses Paul Roget in honor of the Champagne House. Well, in exchange, Odette was so impressed that when she got back to the Champagne House, they in turn named their tête du cuvée, their top of the line champagne, Winston Churchill. So today, you can certainly go to the state store. You can buy a bottle of Winston Churchill Tête du Cuvée from Paul Roget. And again, it's going to set you back about $300. But I thought that was a fascinating story with Winston's favorite champagne. And as you can see, during the war, he was noted to say, remember, gentlemen, it's not just France we are fighting for, it is champagne. Since 3000 BC, the Phoenicians would christen their ships in order to wish them well on their maiden voyages. To this day, we're using champagne to christen ships to this day. There's a photograph of Nancy Reagan christening the USS Ronald Reagan in 2001. And I thought this was rather appropriate. Kate Middleton, a reigning princess, actually christening the Royal Princess for Princess Cruise Lines in 2013. She actually used a 15-liter, $1,500 bottle of Moet. You can see the photograph of the bottle. It was tied to a rope, and the princess christened the bottle with a rather large and expensive bottle of quality champagne. But again, that's just what we end up doing with champagne. Formula One racing, if you're into it, as you might guess, there is a lot of competition amongst the champagne houses to get their champagne on the winner's pedestal. It wasn't too long ago that a different brand was used, but in 2019, Moet has since won the rights to provide the champagne for the Formula One racing teams. And there's a photograph of the Formula One Austrian winner, Valtteri Bottas, using a $600 bottle of champagne on the winner's pedestal in Formula One. I have to second guess. Like I hope they drink some is the bottom line. I don't know. It seems like a waste of champagne, but I guess if you're celebrating and you're not paying the bill, why not? 2018, David Ortiz and the Boston Red Sox. This is $125,000 of Armand de Brignac, 15-liter bottle of champagne used in the locker room celebrating the win. Again, I hope they drank some while they were at it. The Kentucky Derby has its official brand, Mumm Champagne. And for those of you that are big bourbon fans, I just put that on the screen to kind of let you know that there's also a label that's made specifically for the Kentucky Derby, and that's their house brand, the Woodford Reserve Bourbon. Again, you can imagine that Woodford Reserve and Mumm pay a lot of money to get their products in the winner's circle. But there's Victor Spinoza in 2015 with his bottle of Mumm Champagne. And just this past October, celebrities are getting into the business. I've not seen this in the liquor control system yet, but Fleur de Merival champagne is coming out of Brad Pitt's house at $329 if you're so inclined. But again, celebrities seem to be getting into the business. This is a rosé champagne, and I wanted to mention that rosé champagne is the only place in France where they are allowed to make what I would call a kitchen sink blend to make this rosé wine. They can make rosé by either macerating the grapes, the red grapes, on the skins for a little while, or they could use red wine as their dosage. This is where they can blend a little red wine in with the white to make a pink champagne. Only in Champagne is that allowed. But anyway, there's Brad Pitt's brand. I haven't seen it yet. I'm going to guess it's only a matter of time. Let's move through some other traditional method wines around the world. So these are wines not made in France, made someplace else, but using the traditional method. One of my favorites, a Graham Beck out of South Africa. This is the Stellenbosch region. Uses the classical method, or the method cap classique, to make this sparkling brut wine. This is the wine that Nelson Mandela used at his inauguration following his 1994 election as president of South Africa. It's also the wine that Barack Obama would have used in 2008 for his initial inauguration. But look at the price point, $13, very affordable. Delicious wine made in the champagne method or the classical traditional method. Cava out of Spain, one of my favorite products. They are using some indigenous grapes here, the Macabeo grape. Those of you that are familiar with the grape know that another name for Macabeo out of the Rioja region in northern Spain is Viura. So that's the same grape. Viura and Macabeo are the same grape. They just call it something different over in Catalonia. Macabeo, Paralida, and Azzarello are the three white grapes used to make traditional cava. This particular one happens to be one of my favorites. Again, look at the price point. It's only $12. Delicious wine made in the traditional method. I also put some other producers there underneath the map. Raventos, Gran Campo, and Segura Viudas, all of which are delicious wines. I think I've had every one of their different brands, but they are very good, and the price points are outstanding. It was about a year and a half ago, the regulations now allow cava producers to use the words Reserva, Gran Reserva, and Cava de Paraje Calificada on their labels. This is an attempt to try to improve and increase the quality of the wines, the cava in the bottle. As you can see, Reserva requires 18 months of aging, once you add that Licor de Tirage, Grand Reserve 30 months, and the Cava de Paraje Calificada 36 months in the bottle prior to release. So depending on what you're drinking, if your bottle says that, it's just a sign or an indication of a supposedly higher quality bottle. In the Emilia-Romagna region, Franciacorta is the well-known sparkling wine made in the traditional method. This one I know I've seen in the PLCB system. It's a 90% Chardonnay, and in Italy they will call Pinot Noir Pinot Nero. In this case, it's mostly Chardonnay, 10% Pinot Nero, but Berlucchi is the brand that I have seen in our state store system, and very delicious, very good. A little on the pricey side, but nonetheless still good if you're going to have an Italian themed sparkling wine. Incidentally, the 61 on their label simply refers to the year in which the winery first had its first vintage. So they celebrate their first vintage with that 61 on the label. Getting into this country, excuse me, I'm getting a little dry here. Moving to this country, to the United States, I'm going to focus on sparkling wine made in the traditional method. Several places out of California. Schramsberg's my favorite house. I put up their Mirabelle there. You can see the price points. I've also had a chance to visit Chandon in Yountville. Again, very good sparkling wines, as well as Mum Napa. Very good. And Roederer, a little bit further north in Philo, California. Again, but look at the price points. These are all delicious wines. Again, they're all using the traditional grapes, a blend of Chardonnay, Pinot, or Meunier, mostly Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Nonetheless, the price points are outstanding. They're all delicious wines. This one is a favorite. And again, like you can see, a Wine Spectator has rated this particular wine at 90 points. And at $15, I think it's quite a bargain. Laurent Gruet came to this country in the mid-1980s with his parents. His parents were champagne producers, still are. It's Gruet and Fille in Breton, France, in the Champagne, in the Marne region of France. So they brought their champagne skills over to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where they found that there were several very excellent places for growing grapes. They began making wine. The Gruet wine is a popular one for its sparkling line, and again, I very much enjoy it. They make a Brut. They also I think they make a couple of other different varieties, but mostly I've been able to find the Brut in the PLCB system. I mentioned Dr. Frank and the Finger Lakes. They're all using traditional method. There's Megan, the current general manager. She is the great-granddaughter of Constantine Frank, the granddaughter of Willie Frank, and that's her dad, Fred Frank, who's currently the president. There's all their products. I would say of all those products listed, the Celeb is probably their biggest seller, mainly because it's a little bit on the sweeter side. But again, the price points are reasonable. I love their wines. They do an excellent, excellent job. And I would highly recommend a visit to them, to their sparkling cellars, if you have the chance. I think they do not only do a good job, but unless it's changed, and I doubt that it has, all of the tastings at the Dr. Frank Winery are free because they felt as though that's what people deserve. So Dr. Frank's out of Hammondsport, excellent wines, good sparkling line, and yeah, go visit the winery. It's a lot of fun. Willamette Valley Vineyards up in Oregon, making a Method Champenois Brut currently. They are currently investing millions and millions of dollars into a brand new facility solely for the purpose of the production of sparkling wine. There is an artist's conception of the facility in its final form. Right now, the base building, this region here, and some of this is completed, at least the bones are completed, but that's their current winery up at the top, and that's their sparkling facility down below. Again, you can see the price points. I have not seen this in the liquor control system, but if you have a chance, you can, I've mail ordered some of it before, all very delicious wines. The North Fork of Long Island, Sparkling Point. My wife and I had a chance to visit there 2 years ago now. Beautiful, beautiful facility, beautiful wines. I've not seen them in the Pennsylvania system. If you get a chance to get up to that direction, head to the North Fork. That's wine country there. Delicious wines. This is a Method Champenois Brut Nature, which means there was no sugar in the dosage. And again, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Meunier are the grapes used for this particular wine. Other methods. So we talked about the traditional method, but we can make sparkling wine in other ways. The transfer method and the tank method and direct injection, which is not used all that much, all produce a very nice, very inexpensive sparkling wine. The transfer method and the tank method are very, very similar, so I'm not going to try to make a distinction between those two. All the work is done in large tanks. The grapes are picked, they're pressed. The initial wine or the base wine is made in tank. The secondary fermentation occurs also in a tank, a pressurized tank, before the wine is filtered and bottled and then corked and labeled. So you can see that bottle aging and laying on the lees does not happen all that long. One of the wines made in this method is Prosecco. Prosecco is made primarily out of grapes known as Galera grapes. Incidentally, I think it was in the 90s that they used to be called Prosecco grapes. But what that meant was that other people could take Prosecco grapes and make Prosecco. The Italians didn't care for the quality of the product that was being made, and they thought for sure that other Proseccos would tarnish their reputation. So they changed the name of the grape from Prosecco to Galera, and kind of like champagne, if it's going to be called Prosecco, it should come from the Veneto, from that particular region. Some of the higher quality Proseccos, the DOCs and DOCGs, would be your Superiore Conegliano or Valdo Biadene. Cartese, the Superiore de Cartese is considered the highest quality. Some other terms you might find on your Prosecco bottle is Spumante and Frizzante. Spumante referring to just a full fizz, a full sparkling, excuse me, and a Frizzante, just a slight fizziness to the wine. So Frizzante is just slightly fizzy. But again, Prosecco, a very nice product, very, very delicious. It might be fun, for example, to buy your basic La Marca or Ruffino Prosecco, compare that to a Valdo Biadene or a Cartese, just to taste those differences. Asti is made by yet a similar method. This is a Moscato d'Asti, which would again be made out of the Moscato grape. It is a Frizzante, which is a partially sparkling. Again, this is a case where the base wine is made, it's chilled to stop the fermentation, and then we allow the temperature to come up to get the fizziness in the wine very slowly. And once we're satisfied with the alcohol level and the amount of residual sugar that's left over, we will centrifuge it and then bottle it. So that's the Asti method, producing a slightly sparkling, very sweet, very aromatic, very pretty wine. Coming from the Piedmont region, there's one of the labels that's in our liquor control system. The white Moscato or the Moscato Bianco is the grape made in this particular case. Some sparkling reds are out there. Marty and I had this discussion. The Riuniti from I'll call it our college days or our school days would have been the more popular brand. There's a broad variety of Lambruscos out there. I just put Riuniti there as a familiar label from the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, made from the Lambrusco grape. Also in Australia, in this case, the McLaren Vale. The Flugenheimer is a very delicious wine. If you're interested in trying some sparkling Shiraz out of Australia, very, very good. I happen to think that Flugenheimer would go very, very well on the Thanksgiving Day table. It's a sparkling wine. It's a little lighter in body, but a lot of the flavors are just delicious for Thanksgiving, in my opinion. Sparkling Shiraz out of Australia. Time for a party. I just thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about what kinds of other things are done with sparkling wines. You can use champagne. If I was going to use these as mixers, I would certainly want to use something probably not as expensive as a vintage champagne. But Kir Royale is a blend of champagne and raspberry liqueur. A Kir Royale could also be champagne and creme de cassis, a currant liqueur. My wife and I enjoyed some poinsettias over the holidays, some Prosecco, cranberry juice, and orange liqueur, Cointreau. I think we actually use Grand Marnier in ours. The Bellini, a very famous sparkling wine cocktail out of Harry's Bar in Venice, using peach nectar. And of course, the mimosa, the champagne, triple sec, and orange juice. Just fun things to do with your sparkling wine other than drinking it straight, which is never, never a problem. One of my favorites, every Christmas Eve when we were able to get together, my children and I always enjoyed a Saint Germain cocktail, Prosecco and some Saint Germain or elderflower liqueur. Or out of Italy, a very popular Aperol spritzer, which is Aperol is a slightly, or Campari is another product, but making a spritzer out of Aperol, Prosecco, and a slice of orange makes for a great, great summertime on the deck kind of evening, or in this case, a nice holiday celebratory cocktail. What do you have with sparkling wine? Believe it or not, one of the more popular items to pair with champagne these days is potato chips. Kind of makes sense when you think about it. What's better than a nice, greasy, salty snack than a light, sparkling, bubbling wine, and the bubbles and the acidity kind of wash away the fat and the salt, making you ready for the next sip. Seafood is a classic. As you well know, the ground in Champagne is made out of chalk, which is an old seabed. So shellfish, oysters, shellfish, finfish of all kinds go very, very well with not only Champagne, but other sparkling wines as well. Your big fatty cheeses, your triple cream, your double cream, your bries with fruits, all go very, very well with champagne. Sparkling wines. Sparkling is also very popular with your Asian spicy stir fries, curries, noodle dishes, rices, all good pairings. Plain fruit, pastas, again, your fatty, creamy ones so that the acidity and the bubbles kind of wash away and cleanse the palate. The bottom line is sparkling wines are good anytime, anywhere, any place. Open up a bottle of sparkling wine and it's a party. Not only do I appreciate them, I know our friends always look forward to opening up the evening or enjoying the rest of the evening with a sparkling wine. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to once we're able to get together again. Bottom line is celebrate every day. You don't need a celebration other than today is Sunday afternoon to enjoy a nice sparkling wine. And with that, that's my presentation. Enjoy every drop of sparkling wine and enjoy the pleasure and the fun that it brings to the table.
Kevin, thank you very much. And everybody, if you'll note the references that Kevin has included here. And of course, he also listed the codes for a lot of the PLCB products in Pennsylvania. I know we have a lot of listeners from outside of Pennsylvania today, but at any rate, and we'll, Kevin, if you could also advance it one more slide to the, I want to, because before we open the mics and have questions for Kevin, I want to thank all of you for attending, and especially for Kevin, who put a lot of work into this presentation. As you can tell, it was excellent, an excellently done presentation. I also want to remind you that this was presented on behalf of the Pennsylvania Wine Society. We do these sessions every other weekend on Sundays at 3:30. In 2 weeks, Joe Villa will be back with us, and we will be doing red wines of Piemonte, which is the northwestern province of Italy. I have some cousins on this event today, and so that's where our ancestors, our Italian ancestors, hailed from Piemonte around the Asti area. So at any rate, and if you enjoyed this presentation, please go to our website at www.pawinesociety.org. You can check out our membership options. We're always looking for new members. If you are inclined, you can make a monetary contribution, or you can sign up for our newsletter. And if you have any other questions, comments, or suggestions pertaining to this event or future Pennsylvania Wine Society presentations, and you haven't seen them in the newsletter, then please contact me. I'm Marty Cook, and my email is listed there as marty@bcme.net. And with that, I invite everybody to open up your microphones, and we can go ahead and ask Kevin questions about sparkling wines. You'll have to unmute your microphones. Is anybody, actually, Dave Williams, it is pawinesociety.org. You'll have to talk with me offline about that. .com,
Hey,
.com will also work.
Hey, Marty.
Yes.
This is Lauren Debbie in New Mexico.
Oh, hi.
How are y'all doing?
Great. Do you have any?
We saw you sipping away.
Yes, I was. So
we just want to let you know that it's Gruet, not Gruet. The T is silent.
Oh, yes, you would know since you live in New Mexico.
Yeah, well, we know we were members there, but we're not now. But Gruet has the whole complement of all kinds of sparkling, just like some of the other vineyards that you guys listed. But mostly, I just want to let you know that Gruet, the T is silent.
Okay.
Thank you. I've been corrected over the course of time, mainly because when I first learned, I always used to say Moet instead of Moet, and I was corrected to say Moet. So that kind of where my poor French came from. But I appreciate that correction. I will not make that mistake again.
Well, your Western Pennsylvania French, right?
There you go. My Western Pennsylvania French. Yeah.
Any other questions? You'll have to unmute your microphone before you ask. Somebody is coming. Nancy Roth comments that Moet is Dutch, Gruet is French.
Thank you.
I guess their cat's got everybody's tongue, right?
Quite all right.
I have a question.
Excuse me? Did you have a question?
I have one question about the Brut. Does it vary a lot in the different brands or types, regions, or how does the Brut change?
It's going to vary somewhat. Again, that's going to depend on the house itself that's making the product. but typically Brut is going to be anywhere from the 0 to, I would say, low single digits, like 0 to 3, 0 to 5 grams per liter sugar. Again, that's going to vary slightly, but yeah, it's going to be the one, if it's not Brut Nature with 0 dosage, it's going to be fairly dry otherwise.
We have some comments here. Kathy says, thank you so much for the presentation. And another Kathy Morgan says, thank you, Marty. I love sparklers. Let me see. Linda comments, excellent presentation, very informative. Love the history. And Meg Markley mentions thank you, and we very much enjoyed the presentation and info. Who all's with you there, Meg?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What's the background, Kevin? What vineyard is your background?
The background, in June of 2019, I had the pleasure to visit Stellenbosch, South Africa.
Oh my gosh.
And that is, this particular photograph was taken on the patio of Del Air Graff Winery. So that is what the people at Del Air Graff look at every day.
Thank you.
I see somebody with a background that looks like
Unmute.
beach.
Hi, everybody. Can you see this? This is a gadget a friend of mine gave me to open champagne, and it works beautifully. It grabs the cork all the way around, and you just twist it, and the cork comes right off the bottle. So if you see one, buy one.
Well, in that vein, April, here we go. I have 2 different champagne toppers. This one and this one. I love
There you go.
sparklers, and I have
That
a
might
third
be it.
one, but I only have 2 hands. So
Yeah.
here, this one you put on top and you screw down. This one you work it and then press the 2 sides.
Yeah, this you just plop it on.
Right.
Yeah, this is for
Right.
and it actually, this one I know
That's to hold it.
it lasts for like a week. I had a sparkler open
Yeah, she
last
thinks
week
it has
and
a
then I
stopper. It's not a stopper.
opened
No, it's
it
not a
2
stopper.
days
Yeah,
ago and
yeah, the
cut all
stopper.
the bubbles. So this one works really, really well.
Yeah. This is just an opener, not a stopper.
These are stoppers, so yeah.
Yeah, it
Okay.
is. So anyway, if you see it, buy it.
Well, good to see us. There you go.
All right, anybody else? So we had a lot of people saying or typing what they were drinking.
Yeah, tell them we had a good
Any comment on that further?
Where's the bottle?
We want to thank you for a wonderful presentation from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Enjoyed 2 Gruettes, a Ruin, and some Prosecco to finish it off with shellfish.
I can't really see it. There we go.
Good job.
There you go.
Thank you for the opportunity. We've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
When
you talk. This is what I had, or with the Beesons today. Very good. Loire Valley. It's actually a Kermit Lynch selection. And as many of you know, I choose sometimes wines by who's importing them, and he's one of the best.
Good. Jerry, I see you have a question there. Any recommendation for potato chips? As a matter of fact, I do. My favorite potato chips come out of Hers in Pennsylvania. I happen to like their kettle crisps, and they're thin and all the Hers products are good. I will share this story with you. If you get a chance to go visit the Hers factory, it sounds kind of hokey, but it's a lovely, lovely tour. At the end of the tour, the tour guide gets dressed up in well, I'm sure with COVID, it's a different story, but They went out with a cafeteria tray and stuck the cafeteria tray under the potato chip conveyor belt and collected a huge cafeteria tray of piping hot
Oh,
potatoes,
yes.
and then
Oh.
brought it out to the tour group. They were the best potato
Let's
chips
go
I've
there.
ever had in my life.
Yeah, let's go. All right.
If you get a chance to go to do the HERS tour, fascinating tour, but their products, I think I'm very partial to the HERS products. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
All right. Dave Williams comments that he's drinking a Rosé Brut with some shrimp, and that Rosé Brut comes from Stony Run, which is a winery in the Lehigh Valley wine trail. So,
Excellent. I'm sure there's plenty of
Don't do
wineries in
that.
Pennsylvania making them. I'm just not familiar with many of them because, again, we haven't been traveling that much in this past year, to say the least.
well, Pinnacle Ridge used to make them, but they're closed now. But their assistant winemaker who just did a virtual wine tasting with us from his winery about 2 months ago, which is Beano Winery out of Allentown. And that's Kevin Dana, and he's going to be making a sparkler this year. He learned from Brad over at Pinnacle Ridge. So he learned the tricks of the trade. So that's something to look forward to. So anyone else? We have a lot of states represented today. I see somebody from Virginia. There's, of course, from New Mexico. I know there were people here from California and obviously Pennsylvania. Any other states represented here? No? I thought maybe we might have some from Jersey. But at any rate, well, if nobody else has any other questions, somebody, Kathy Morgan says, I am drinking the Pinnacle Ridge now. It is excellent.
Good.
All right. So Jamie DeShong says, presentation was great. We learned a lot. Thank you. And with that, I think we'll probably shut it down and see you again in 2 weeks with Joe Villa when we talk about red wines from Piemonte. I think we're going to be doing Barbera and Dolcetto and Nebbiolo. So get ready for that. And all of the wines will be ready in the Pennsylvania's Liquor Control Board stores. All right, everybody. Thank you for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you, Kevin. Good night.
Good night.